palm strike. Now, something else hidden in the pull and palm strike is the waist trap, which I sometimes use in sticky hands. Say, for example, in sticky hands, I see that Gavin's elbow of his tan is not going in as far as it should. In other words, I can see a gap there between his elbow and his body. So when I see that, I can slip behind and use that same motion of pulling and palm striking here to hyperextend him in a couple of different ways. The same idea would come into play in a situation, say we're open. If he'd give me the 1 and then the 2, if I get him here, the same idea of hyperextending and pulling him and pushing him is at work there. All right, next I'm going to talk about the pivot into the lansao motion, or the horizontal forearm block. Now there's a lot of different ways that we use lan. You notice that my hand is twisted away. That simulates either grabbing or laying over trapping. Now when I say lay over trap, what I mean is, for example, closed. After I do a pak da and Gavin stops that, if I grab and chop here, that's when I like to use the lansao. You can see how my hand is turned away from me. That's why it's turned away in the form. It simulates laying over 2 hands. I might use the layover trap against 2 hands. Say we were like this, and his hands were up close. His hands were up high. I might use the layover trap there across both of his arms. See, what I did was I came in here, trapped the hands, hit, and then laid across both of them in that way. So I might use my lansao in that manner. All right, now I drill into bong and pull back into lan. Now I'll talk about the pivoting bong more in a minute, but just the idea of pulling back from bong. There's a saying in Wing Chun that lansao is nothing but bong sao moving backwards. Now, in a situation where you have bong sao already, you can use lan moving backwards to trap or pull across. An example of that would be in sticky hands. I have bong sao on my left arm, but sometimes I'll use that lan and turn into lansao rather from bong. In other words, here I was in bong, and what I did is pivot and pull. And that's the same movement right out of the form. You know, bong into lan. So I can use it that way. Now sometimes I'll use lansao as a pull instead of lapsao, which normally I would use. Let's say we're open and the punch came here. Now normally I use a lapsao motion pulling into my hip. That exposes the dead side, which I'll talk about more in the theory tape. But right now I'm pulling him to a position where I can hit him, but he can't hit me. So normally this is the way I like to pull, to my hip. But sometimes you don't want to pull to your hip. I'll give you a couple of examples. Once I've done bong here, and that, let's say for example I want to hit the body. Well, if I want to go with a body shot, why would I pull his hand down and get in my own way? So in a situation like that, I might want to pull across to open the body. Another time when I might want to do such a pull, if his guarding hand was a little too far forward when he punched here, I might want to then leak underneath. And in a situation like that, I wouldn't want to pull my arm down because that would get in the way of my own fist. So you'd use lansao that way. Okay, now I want to talk more about the drilling into bong sao. You see that I go from the lan position with my shoulders square to that wall, and I drill forward 45 degrees. So I pivot 90, but my body only moved 45. So we've already seen where your pivot can get you 180 degree body turn, 90 degree body turn, in this case 45 degree body turn. Now as I'm drilling forward, I'm using that torque of my hips to drive and send that bong sao forward on the center line to the same place I would have punched. And I'll talk more about reference in the theory tape. But for right now, you let it suffice to say this is the first of the yang blocking motions, or strength-oriented power blocks. Now as I'm doing this, I also retract my other hand into cow sao structure to protect my face as a second line of defense. In other words, in case that punch does get through bong, my other hand will be there and it'll be loaded. Now, in other words, what I'm saying is, when that punch comes, and if I pivot bong here, what I don't want is I don't want my wu sao hand here, because Gavin can easily trap it and punch me. So instead, I want to keep it tucked back out of the way, so it's a little bit harder for him to grab. It's also back, it's loaded up, so it can easily become a grab with some power to it. Now, this brings to mind the fact that the lapsao cycle, which we practice for speed and timing and trapping skill, is hidden right in the form. Now at the very end of the form, you're going to see that I'm going to do a movement like this, jet punch. Right now I'm doing this, but if you take and put them together, you have the lapsao cycle hidden within the form, just like the double rolling hands was hidden in the Siling Tao form. Now, one of the ways that I would use pivoting bong in a drill is if Gavin was punching me, I might just pivot bong and practice it this way, drilling into his punch and cutting forwards. Now, also within the lap south cycle, we can switch it over from side to side, and again, there's the pivoted bong sao working. All right, next I'm going to talk about the outward diagonal punch, Ngoi Doi Gatking. So you can see that from position, I lay my fist right near the elbow, and then slide across my own arm as I pull in and throw the punch. It looks like a back fist, but it's not. It's a straight punch. Okay, it just comes from the other side. In the beginning of the first form, you punched like from where the hand was to the center. This time you're punching from across the line to the center. All right, the time I would use that, let's say we were open. If I had thrown a jab and Gavin used jam sao to block it and got the center line, I can then exclude that punch to the side. So what I did was I let him go the direction he wanted to go in. Now, if I had used jam sao, I could do the same thing. From my own jam, I could exclude through and then follow up in a number of ways. In this case, all I did was just block, pushed it out in the direction I already sent it in the first place, then I grabbed on and kicked, and then just followed up whichever way. All right, now I also use that in sticky hands when my opponent does what's called deep jam, or meaning he has his elbow in too much. If Gavin's elbow is in so much that he's actually cramped, what I will do is take advantage of that by excluding him in the direction he already wants to go. So again, what I did was saw his arm was stuck in too far, so I just pushed it out with my fist while hitting him, and that set him up for the follow-up. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Jingma Fun Sao. Now what happens is from the punch, my stance straightens back to the middle, my foot stops, but my hand keeps going, and I keep my eyes focused on my fingertips. The important part here is to learn to follow something that's moving fast with your eyes without losing focus. So it's eye focusing power you're developing, and that's an important skill. It helps you sort of slow down your surroundings. When someone's throwing punches fast at you, you don't see a blur, you can see the punches clearly. Now also you notice, I won't put the pivot in, so with the sound, you should be able to hear my hand sort of sizzle through the air. Your hand has to cut through the air by staying relaxed, so it just cuts this way. Now, the time I use that principle of the stance stopping and the hand keeps going, say for example, just from the bong again here, I can use part of a stance turn to power, but my hand keeps going. In other words, I don't want my foot to keep going, because if it does, I'm going to turn my back on my opponent. So even though my foot stops, my hand can keep going, multiplying the power that was created by the stance movement, that little half turn. So I would use it in that way. All right, next I'm going to talk about going back into Fuk Sao from that position. So my hand is here, and again, I whip down. Now what you want to have in this is a real relaxed whip of the hand using the elbow as a source of power. Sounds fake like those Kung Fu movies, but that's actually the way it sounds. Now I use Fuk Sao to block a shot that's coming in where my hand is already partially extended. So for example, when a punch comes in, I'll use Fuk Sao here and kind of whip my hand inward and downward. So again, it looks like that. Now, in a situation against a 1-2, I might go here and then view and then finish it up this way. So Fuk Sao could be used to block shots that way. If we were closed, I could just reverse that type of movement. The first punch came, I might use Tan Dao. The next one came, Fuk Sao might stop it there, and that would set me up for another combination. So I could use it there. Now, it can also be used to hit with, using that part of the hand as a strike. That's an adductive or toward the body strike. Wing Chun would like to use those type of hits only when we're either hugged or we're on the floor or in a situation where we can't get power from the floor. In other words, a lot of times you pivot and you get power by pushing off the floor. So when you can't sort of push off the floor, like someone's lifted you up off your feet, for example, you can't get any pivoting power from your feet or your hips. So if Gavin had bear hugged me and lifted me up, that's the time when I might want to use Fuk Sao as a strike, because I can use this type of motion to get power in my hits from close range, but I don't have to use any pivoting power. I can use gravity, use my body weight to pull inwards. Now I can use those same type of hits on the floor. Say for example, I'm going to go down to the floor now. So if Gavin was sort of sitting on top of me and choking me, I might want to use Fuk Sao either to trap here and get across both of his hands and then start hitting him, hammering him in the body or in the head. Here, these type of shots. And I would use it to attack to the temple or any of these type of things, because punching from the floor is not as powerful. It's cramped. I don't have the same kind of power that I can generate here, whipping down and whipping to attack this way. Okay, next I'm going to talk about Chut Sao, scraping down the arm after the low fook here. Now, as I said before, fook sao could be used as a strike. Now, in those same situations I showed standing up or laying down, after having used fook sao to strike with, you can follow up with another chop following your own hand. It's especially important in this case, following your hand, to find the target. Because the times I showed you when you would normally use this type of hitting is a panic situation. You're lifted off your feet, you're laying down or whatever, you might not be able to see what's going on. So once you've felt this thing here, you can use your own arm to follow and then hit. That principle goes for other movements, not just Chun sao. In other words, if I'm here and I've done, say, Tanda, I don't need to see his arm. I can use his arm to guide me to the target again, so I don't have to look. In other words, once you're on the person's arm, you can sort of follow it. From Jam sao, for example, I can just follow his arm to the target in a situation when I can't exactly see. For whatever reason, my head's turned, eyes are cloudy or teary, from being hit in the nose, whatever. You can follow that person's arm to a shot. So that's one of the other applications for Chun sao. All right, next I'm going to talk about the Lan sao Jing Kiu motion. Okay, I won't talk about the way I land or any of the other things, but for right now, I'll just concern myself with this. Notice that I open my hand, turn, close the fist during the kick, and then I fall down into, the next move we'll talk about on the next segment. But for right now, we'll worry about that. Now, first of all, this teaches you the very first kick of Wing Chun, which is the Jing Kiu, or the vertical kick, straight kick, which is to take the foot and kick outwards with the shoulder square to the target. So that's the very first kicking structure of Wing Chun, keeping your shoulder square to the opponent and also, during a hand movement, still being able to kick. Now, that skill is pretty handy. For example, when we're open against the 1-2, bong, there's the move straight out of the form. See, as I went bong here, grab, pulling him across. Remember how I said don't pull down, it blocks the way? Well, that's what I meant. In this case, if you were going to kick, you'd want to pull him this way to keep the body open to the kick. Now, you also notice that one hand is pulling, the other one's pulling the other way. See, this can simulate trapping the opponent when he's trying to trap you, and using your legs to kick when your hands are tied up. An example of that would be, if I had punched and Gavin did bong here, and he trapped me. Now my hands are trapped, what I can do is simulate the movement from the form. Because what happened here is I went sort of like the form. So if Gavin disappears right now, it looks like the form. So that's one of the ways that I use that movement. All right, now I can use that same kind of structure in sticky hands when I get double trapped. Because if Gavin goes for the punch here, what I can do is, again, go with that same movement, just like in the form. Because what happened was, I felt myself being trapped up, so I followed the structure from the form and went into the kick. And I used that stupid trap from the earlier form. So we can use it in that way. Now, this also introduces us to the concept that you can block and kick at the same time. See, a lot of the times, especially when you're using yang blocking motions like Bong Sao, and yang blocks are good and powerful, but there's only one problem with them. You can't hit during a yang block. As I'll talk about in the principles tape, yin blocks, or receiving blocks, are superior because they leave your strong side open to hit. See, when you use yang or power-oriented blocks, your hitting side is used up. You can't hit with bong because you're using your power into the bong. You can't hit with this type of pak sao because you're using your power, or jam. But when you're using wu, you can still hit. Gang, you can still hit. Hyun sao, you can still hit at the same time. So the problem with yang blocks is you can't hit. Or, well, actually you can, because they're telling you in Chim Kiu that you can kick during the blocking sequence. So for example, if we were doing lop sao, the biu sao switch, when I'm on the defense, when Gavin goes for biu here, and I'm here, and then here, all three of those syllables, I was defending, and I was using yang blocking power on two of the syllables. But instead, if Gavin attacked me and I went here, here, I can kick at the same time as I use a yang block. There's nothing wrong with that. They're telling you that during a yang blocking motion, it's okay to kick. All right, now I want to talk some more about the movement coming down. Once I've kicked, the way I bring my foot down straight, don't even worry about the bong sao yet, let's just talk about that. So after I kick, you notice that the leg comes down to the heel first. That in itself is called jut gyok, or jerking leg. It's the legs corresponding to the hand. Outside jerking hand, it's the same idea, using the outside jerking hand as the outside jerking leg. They correspond, and they're used in a real similar way. Now, one of the ways that I use it is to break down the stance after I've done a kick. So when a jab comes and I've kicked, sometimes I'll just jut the guy's leg down to trap him and to knock him down, take his balance. Another time I like to use the jut leg is once I've kicked, if he tries to kick my leg, then I'll use it there to take his balance and to block at the same time. So you see what happened was I was kicking, and as I felt that come in, I'd use it there. It wouldn't matter if he tried to kick with the other leg. It wouldn't have mattered. I'd still use the same idea of the jut leg. So I like to use it there. Another time I like to use it, let's say we're open against the 1-2. Again, from bong, seitan down. Here, once I get the guy's throat, jut leg against the back of his leg to take his balance. So I'm using it moving inward. Now, as I talked about earlier, with the fuksao as a hit, it's an adductive hit, meaning it comes toward the body. Now, the time, again, when a Wing Chun guy likes to use those type of kicks as an attack is when he doesn't have the ground to push off of, like when you're on the floor. Say, for example, I've been knocked down. Gavin might be on top, choking me, whatever. What I like to do is use my foot to attack with the heel. If I can get him in a situation where I can hit different parts of the spine, or if I could get him down here and hammer down the face, the body, or if we were rolled over in a situation like this, I might use it to attack down to the groin, or here, down to the face, the body, attack that way. All right, next I want to talk about the bong sao after the jut gyuk, so I fall into the bong. What they're telling you is that after you kicked, to block, in certain situations you have to do that. See, normally when you kick people, they get mad at you and they try to hit you. Most people don't like being kicked. Now, in a situation where, for example, in a drill, I put in a kick. Let's say, for example, we were doing the lap-sao cycle, and I was doing the Chang Dai Jan switch with the kick. There I had to land with bong sao because he was responding back too quickly for me. See, what I had done was I was attempting to go kick there. But what Gavin did was see the opening. He wants to punch me in the face. So I have to be able to quickly fall into a block. So there's an example of how I would use it nearly exactly as it is in the form. Now if we're closed, say for example I've kicked him in the knee and he tries to punch me as I fall, I have to be ready to follow up with a block. I had intended to come down and hit him here. But before I got a chance, I saw a punch coming, so I had to be prepared to block on my way down. All right, next I'm going to talk about the drop down to the Chim Kiu motion, which means sinking bridge. Now what I'm doing here is dropping my hands down with a twist. Now this simulates sinking the bridge, which I'll show you, and it also literally is a way of hyperextending or breaking the person's arm. Now for example, against the 1-2, I might stop the first with the jab and then receive that second one here. See, and that would be the arm break or hyperextension you could follow up. So again, I went here and then received with that sinking twist of the hands in between. Now, I could have used it after having hit him. Say the jab came and I hit the body. Now he tried to hit me. Again, the same movement. I've come in, hit the body. When that one tries to hit me, I can hyperextend his arm, and again, there. Now, one of the ways we practice this movement is in an attack cycle, a repeating set of movements that go over and over. So, for example, it would be like the punch comes, I'd hit, Chim Kiu, unit out. Bong, hit, Chim Kiu, circle out. 1, 2, 3, 1.